Hey everyone, this is Scott at Celigo, and I'm going to do a video today on transformations. And before I get started with the video, I want to highlight who is this video for. Okay, so this video is for both beginners and experts with Integrator.io. I say it's for beginners because we're going to go through the transformation functionality, the concept, when to use it, in detail. Transformations are a really important foundational part of building flows that makes flow building much easier. And then I say this video is for experts because we're going to be looking at Transformation 2.0, which we just released last week. And I'm going to go through all the functionality included in Transformation 2.0. It's quite a departure from 1.0, unblocking a lot of use cases that couldn't be done in 1.0. And so if you're an expert out there, you're going to really appreciate this video because you're going to see all of the 2.0 functionality in just one quick video. Taking a step back at a very high level, anyone out there who wants to get better at building flows, and why do we want to get better at building flows? Because flows allow us to automate all kinds of workflows that span different applications at our business. Flows also allow us to integrate apps and data. We have data in all these different places. We use all these different apps. Using an iPaaS, building flows allows you to bring it all together in lots of creative ways. And this video, transformations, definitely an important part of being successful building flows. All right, so let's get started. Alrighty, so we're in the product now, and I'm going to jump over to a recent flow that I built. At a very high level, this flow is listening for messages from Slack, and then it sends those messages through a bunch of different branches depending on what's in the message. And I'm not going to go into detail on the flow, but let me just zoom out real quick and scan over, and you could just see that when messages come in, there's a lot of stuff that happens to them. Okay, so now in this video we're going to talk about transformations. And first let me just answer the question, what is a transformation? So a transformation, and this is where you would select it in your flow. A transformation is your opportunity to change the source data before the data gets processed by your flow. And so this is really foundational because it allows you to simplify the data, massage the data, add stuff to the data, to get it all into a canonical format, etc. And again, just very foundational to building successful flows is thinking about when the data first gets into my flow, let's get that data in tip-top shape, and then let's process it. Okay, so now I'm going to click into this transformation drawer, and the next question I'm going to answer is, what are the different ways to do transformations in Integrator.io? So first of all, there was what we've all seen for a long time. It's Transformation 1.0. It's under the Rules 1.0 engine, and I'm not going to go through this in any detail, but other than to state that it's here. I do not recommend using the Rules 1.0 engine anymore. We have Rules 2.0. This is Transformation 2.0, and this is what we'll spend the majority of our time in this video. So you can transform data with a Rules 2.0 engine. There's a JavaScript version of the same. So if you don't like writing rules and defining mappings, and you're comfortable with JavaScript, which as a developer, I love using JavaScript, you can come over here and build a JavaScript record, define a function, and then it's a simple function where you're given a record and you output a record. And so this lets you take over the transformation process completely in your code. And then the final option is outside of the transformation window, we also have what are called JavaScript hooks. And in the hook, I can, and you can see this flow actually uses a hook because again, I'm a developer. I love, doing things in code. It's easy for me. I can also do my transformation here. And the difference between here and the JavaScript version in the transformation drawer is that this is given the whole page of records that your flow is going to process versus one record at a time. So the JavaScript version in the transformation drawer is a simplified option where you're given a record and you output a record, and that's all you got to think about in your code. This pre-save page hook, you're given a whole page of records at a time. Like if you're getting data out in batches, you're also given other options that are part of the flow's runtime. And so it allows you to do more if you're comfortable working with those bigger data structures. And then the key use case here is if you want to merge records, delete records, create more records within the page and kind of like expand it out or shrink it down, sort things, etc. You can do it. You can work across records and return the page versus just returning the record. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is talk about when to use a transformation. Okay, so the first use case for when to use a transformation is when you have a flow like the one we see here on the screen. In this flow, I have just one source and then many different destination steps. And the reason transformations are important for those types of flows is because they give you a chance to simplify the record before you go and process it again and again and again. So let's see in more detail what I mean by this, if it's not obvious. I'm going to go into the transformation that I defined. And again, this data is coming from Slack. If we were to look at the data, so this is exactly as Slack gives it to us, we can see lots of fields, we have objects, we have arrays within objects, arrays within arrays within arrays of objects, a lot of fields that I don't need. And I don't want to deal with this payload in every single downstream flow step because I don't need a lot of this stuff. I would much rather simplify this record here so that all the flow steps downstream have just something very basic to work with, containing only the minimal information that I actually need to process. So I said at the beginning of the video that transformations are a foundational capability to make flow building easy. This is exactly what that means. Here is where you can simplify the data so that everything else is easier to work with as you're building and testing your flow. I personally love foundations. Whenever I start a new flow, I spend a lot of time looking at the data that came out of the source, thinking about the best ways to simplify it, and then that just sets me up for success as I keep building. So let me just click preview too, just so you can see, like here's what I got as an input, again from Slack, and then in the output here, this is all I wanted and care about. And this is all any of the other steps in my flow will see, just a handful of fields with the exact data that I want to process. Okay, so now let's go into another use case. And again, this one source bubble, lots of processing in your destination and lookup section. If I had a couple other source bubbles, that's fine too. Again, it's just when you have much fewer source bubbles and lots of destination bubbles, that's when it makes sense to use a transformation to simplify the records before they processed by all the bubbles on the right-hand side. Okay, so now the other type of flow where it makes a lot of sense is, let me pan out to my home page. And I'm going to go over to, all right, so here I have a flow where I am syncing a MongoDB database to Snowflake. And in this flow, you can see it kind of over here on this grayed out map, tons of sources. And then only one destination. So kind of the opposite of the last flow where we had one source and lots of destinations. Here we have lots and lots of different sources, but only one destination. So why is transformation helpful or a best practice here? It's because here I want the data to go into what's called a canonical format. I'm getting all the data here from the same MongoDB database, but very different schemas. There are a lot of use cases out there where you could be getting data from lots of different apps. Like if you're syncing your item catalog or you're syncing customer records from all the different places where you have customer records. Those customers look different in different places. But if you want to send them to just one customer table in Snowflake, if you're doing a data warehousing use case where you're trying to collect all your customer records in one place, or in this case, I'm just trying to capture all of my MongoDB database records in Snowflake, but in a canonical format, I can use transformations to change the data from all the different sources, put it into a canonical, and then that allows me to have just one destination bubble that handles all of the different sources. And then so anytime I need to add a new source, all I have to do is add the source, add the transformation to make sure it maps to what I have defined as my canonical for this flow, and then the import or whatever steps you have will just automatically work because it just expects a certain format, and if it gets that format, everything's going to succeed. So again, if you have lots of sources, fewer destinations, and you want the ability to quickly add sources coming from different places, you can use transformations to map those source records over to a canonical representation of data that your flow wants to process. And again, very much a best practice. And you'll notice here too, I just want to touch on this, I'm not using transformations. I mentioned that I'm a developer, I like doing stuff in JavaScript, so I'm just doing it here in a JavaScript hook. But I could very easily, this hook in this flow is a really simple function. I could really easily replicate that with a transformation 2.0 rule. Okay, and then so we looked at two use cases where it makes a lot of sense to use transformations. I want to show one final use case here. Let me see if I can get a good one. Okay, so here it is. All right, so this is a flow where you do not need to do transformations. Not a best practice necessarily. You could do them, but you don't have to. And that's just when you have one source, one destination. It's very straightforward. So here you could do transformations to get the source record into some format that you like to work with. But just note on the import, you're also going to define a mapping. And you don't always have to define a mapping. So if you can get the source into the exact format that you want to send along to Slack, in this case, I'm sending a payload back to Slack, then you can do that. But a lot of times it's nice to do a mapping when you're sending data to Slack to work with Slack's fields in that context. And here's mapper 2.0 that allows you to do that. And in this case where you have just one and one, it doesn't matter if you're using a transformation. In this case, I typically will do a mapping instead, just allow the source data to come out as is, don't touch it, and then deal with all the nuances in the mapping. And I find that that's just easier to do. And only when I have flows where there's lots of bubbles or lots of sources, then I'll take the time to do a transformation so that my flow is easier later. Okay, so now let's go back over to that first flow that we were looking at. And what we're going to do now is look at transformation 2.0 in detail. We're going to cover all the functionality here. Okay, so again, transformation 2.0, you're going to go to the rules 2.0 tab. And then the first thing that I want to highlight is that we have 3 modes that you can choose from. And so the first mode, and this is the default, I'm not using the default here, but the first mode is to modify the input record. And this mode is awesome. This was the kind of the biggest problem with our rules 1.0 engine, that we didn't have this. Here is where I can say, I don't want to do anything to the input record other than add a new field, or I want to modify an existing field. Modify input record, it just works on the record that comes in. It makes very targeted changes to the record and then spits out the output record with just your targeted changes and keeping everything else in the input as is. So again, if you want to add just one new field, one hard-coded value, you want to concatenate 2 fields but then not do anything else, or set a certain set of fields to empty strings or null, but don't touch anything else in the payload, modify input record is the way to go. And again, very easy to use because you can do just very targeted changes without having to redefine the whole object itself. Okay, now the second mode that I'll go into is where we're creating an output record from the input record. So this is pretty straightforward. So I have a source system, it gives me source records, and now I want to create an output record that my flow is going to process. And here I want to define it from scratch. I'm doing that in this flow, this option, because again, I wanted to simplify that data from Slack. There was a lot that I just didn't want to include. In fact, most of it I didn't want to include. And so I chose this option because this is the easiest way for me to pick and choose just the things that I want and to be done with it. And then the final mode is to create output rows from records. So for those of you that don't know, Integrated Arrow supports two kind of data structures when processing flows. There's record-based data and there's row-based data. Row-based data is like array-based data. So when you're dealing with like CSV files and multiple rows are grouped together by a key column, that's what we call row-based data. And so here's where there's no choice but to work with an array of rows. And so maybe you're sending this data to a CSV file where you want rows to be grouped together. You can then transform a record transform a record into a set of rows. More commonly, though, you would probably be getting rows as well, and in that you can't see the create output rows from input rows because I have a record in this case. But if the source data was in this row-based data structure, you would see that as the default here, and then you could decide, I want to create a record from the rows or just keep the rows. But again, I think, just taking a step back, the nice thing is that we now have three modes when we're defining our transformations. One is to do these little targeted changes, one is to create, and then the other two are to create brand new objects. And then there's one tailor-made for if you want to deal with record-based data, and then there's another one that's tailor-made for if you want to output rows to do row-based data. And then depending on your source record, it's automatically going to show you that option. And then anything that you want to transform the data to is going to be supported in the Rules 2.0 engine. Okay, so the next thing I want to highlight is that Transformation 2.0 is very similar to our Mapper 2.0. So real quick, I'm going to bounce over to what Mapper looks like. Here I just edited a mapping from one of the other steps in my flow. And you can see an almost identical interface. Mapping and transformation are pretty much the same thing. Transformation is when you take data from some other system and transform it into something that you want your flow to process, and then Mapper is where you take the thing that the flow is processing and you transform it into the payload that your external apps will accept. And I bring this up just to state maybe the obvious that learning our Transformation 2.0 functionality will also help you learn our Mapper 2.0 functionality. And then, transformations and mappings are like by far the most common thing you will do in your flow. It's where you will spend most of your time. It's where all the details of fields, which, when we're syncing data, it's all about getting fields mapped between systems. And so this is where you'll spend most of your time. It's where you'll unblock most of your bugs with data, and again, I highly recommend taking the time to learn all the ins and outs of what you can do in Transformation 2.0 and in Mapper 2.0, and once you master one, the other one's really is a piece of cake. I'll most likely do a video on Mapper 2.0 at some point too, maybe soon, but then it'll be very similar to this video. Okay, so now, all right, so the next thing I want to jump to is, so now let's say we're doing a transformation, and so let's look at these two columns of fields. So on the left is the output record that we're trying to create, and then on the right are the fields from the source record. And so now As it relates to the output record, here you're going to define always a single field. So here I'm saying, let's pick a field, channel. I am defining an output field called channel, and I am saying that that field is a string. So here we have lots of different output data types that you can select. String, number, Boolean. You can define an object, string array, number array, object array. You can build anything you can think of. In this case, I'm doing a string, and by default too, there's a lot of default kind of mapping that'll take place. If you're going string to string, that's easy. If you're going number to string, it'll automatically convert the number to a string, so you don't have to do anything really. And then there's some where it just doesn't make any sense, in which case the mapping will fail. But again, I guess the key thing I wanted to highlight is that you're always creating in the output just a single field, and you'll notice in the source there's a path structure, and if you want to define paths in the output record, the way that you do that, and I'll just go and add a new field, my new object, is you're going to define the objects. So here I'm going to say object, confirm, and now you'll notice that I have a new, so I'm building an object called my new object, and then I see kind of an indented set of new columns, and this is where I can define fields. So if I wanted to do the token field to my new field underneath the object, that's going to work. And you probably can't see this under my video. Let me switch over the layouts actually. Maybe we can get a better layout here. Yeah, so here we go. And let's collapse this even more because we don't really care about the input that much. Here you can see the new object, new field generated underneath now. So the reason these are always individual fields is because you do the path structures by defining object with an object with an object, and you can do array and so on, and you can keep going down as deep as you like, and then always just single fields here. Okay, so now the next thing that I wanted to cover is, okay, so the source fields use Json Path. So that's a really big deal. Very different than 1.0 as well. And so this just makes it really easy, and then also really powerful for selecting fields from your source record. So we have this UI where we've already kind of expanded out and come up and generated all the Json Path expressions for finding the things you want. And you can just select stuff, or you can always type your own Json Path. If you're not familiar with Json Path, I definitely recommend learning about it. It's a really easy syntax, $, and then it's a standard too. So it's just harnessing a better standard than we could ever come up with. And then there are, of course, open source modules that we use to then process the Json Path expressions. And again, it's just really easy way and very powerful way to get fields out of your source record, regardless of the structure that you're dealing with. And so, and just to show that example here, I'm going to look at one specific field. So, in my input, I wanted in this flow, I'm processing Slack messages, and I wanted to get out all the URLs that are sent in the Slack message. And the way that Slack does that is they bury it. So underneath events, underneath blocks, underneath elements, there's another elements, then we have an array, and then there are links where there's a URL. So I wanted these fields. Now, I could, before 2.0, Transformation 2.0, I could write some JavaScript that iterates, like for loop within a for loop within a for loop to go get all these URLs out. But now with Json Path, I was able to completely get rid of that ugly code. And I just went down just using the UI and chose the URL field. And then you'll notice the syntax that it outputs, $.event.blocks with the wildcard, .elements, etc. And then the URL field. And then it automatically got all the URLs. So it can go up and down arrays, iterating ignoring empty ones, etc. And then it gave me just a very simple array with all the links. And then, so that was awesome. I was really delighted by that. All the other ones in here I think are pretty straightforward with just string to string matches. But when you do need to get stuff buried across arrays, across different objects, Json Path, really awesome option. And again, highly recommend going and reading about Json Path just as its own thing, so you're familiar with the syntax, and it'll just make it easier for you to build these expressions here when you need to do something that's not directly in our drop-down helpers. Okay, so now the next key thing I would like to highlight, and let's go down and build a new field here. Okay, so my expression is that, so I can click on the settings drawer for any of these field mappings. And so just real quick, let me describe the settings drawer. So when you click settings for a field mapping, you're getting kind of both the destination, the output and the input. So the output data type here is a string. And then here's the different transformation types I can do. So if you've seen Mapper 2.0 or even Mapper 1.0, you'll know this will look familiar, but you can do standard, hard-coded, static, or handlebars expressions. You can say if it's a date field. Here's where you specify the input field. So again, we're seeing the same helper that we had for choosing the Json path. You can say what you want to do if the input has no value. So maybe you want to do a custom value always, like false or 0 or empty. You can define a custom value when the source has nothing, or an empty string or null. And then finally at the bottom you can describe something like this is just your place to document why you're doing settings for this field mapping. This is a terrible comment because it's not very helpful, but you could type whatever you want here and save that. Now the key use case that I wanted to go through, though, is jumping over to handlebars expression, because this is also something that we didn't support in 1.0, and this is really game-changing. It's in Mapper 2.0, and again, just unlocks a ton of different use cases. So here, when I'm building my new field, I can say, instead of doing Json Path, I want to do a handlebars expression, and now I'm launching our standard handlebars editor, and I can do so let's say I want to concatenate two fields, record event ID colon record dot event time, click preview, and so we can see, and then click save and close. Save and close, and so now I'm, instead of doing Json Path, I'm doing a handlebars expression, and this is super powerful because it allows you to generate any value you can think of for your output field. So here I need to define a new output object within my larger object. I'm defining new fields. One of the fields is going to be an expression based on the data. And then I have the power of the full handlebars editor to build anything I can think of with handlebars templates. And then that will now be output as my field value for this field when the record is processed by my flow. Okay, so now the next question that comes to mind, is when to use Json Path versus when to use handlebars, because they're two kind of distinct modes when doing your field mappings within your transformations. And this is a very simple question to answer. So if you're just looking for a field that's already in your source record, you're going to do Json Path, and you're just going to, most of the time, use our UI to find the field you want, and it's going to give you the expression. Other times you may be doing something fancy where you're going to go figure out the Json path you want to do, and then just type it in here. And then, again, if you're iterating arrays, Json Path's really, really good at iterating arrays. and getting very targeted stuff from your source record. Now, if you want to do anything else other than select fields directly from your source record, that's where expressions come in very handy. Handlebars, you can build anything. So if you're concatenating fields, adding, doing substrings, so maybe we'll go back over here and look at this. There's a lot of things available here that you can do to your data, and then because it's just a templating language, you can structure it however you want. You can build any type of format. So again, pretty limitless. So anytime you're building a specific field value, where that value is not just a single field from the source record, where you want to construct something, then choose expression, and then use handlebars handlebars templates to craft the exact value that you want to output. All right, so now before I leave this page, I'm sure some of you can see at the bottom this thing called Celigo AI. I wanted to touch on this. Maybe this is like the little Easter egg of the video, because right now all the AI stuff is emerging. And definitely we have a lot of plans to release a lot of cool functionality to help you with the product using AI. And let's get a little sneak peek of what we have here. And this also just came out last week. It's so far is internal only to Celigo employees. I believe we're gonna make it available in beta maybe in a month to customers. And there's some known limitations that we're fixing rapidly, but it's going to be awesome. So just maybe the TLDR here is that this AI tool, I'm going to use it as a power user because it just makes everything so much easier to do. And so let me just give you a quick little sneak peek of what you can do here. All right, so let me get rid of this. Let's delete what I have, and the handlebars template for concatenating the record token : team ID. And so boom, and it missed the colon added in. Those are the little types of details we're fixing right now. But you can basically tell it what you want to do in English, and it's going to update the template above. All right, so let's do another example that I've already pre-typed, and let's do this. So I'm asking it, can you also concat the handlebars expression for the event text field in there? All right, so now we see that it added in the text, this time separating it with a dash. Can you separate the three expressions with forward slashes? So it went and updated that. So anyway, it's just, again, awesome way to tell our product what you're trying to do, and then it will show you how to do that. And then, I'm a power user who wants to do this to save time from racking my brain on doing this. But then there are probably many people out there who are going to do this and then, not really like IMing with an AI, but then, the AI showed them how to do something, and now they can go and type and use keyboard commands much faster. So again, it's kind of addressing this skills gap where you didn't really know how to do this stuff. Not hard to do, but you just didn't know. You tell it what you want to do, you see how it did it, and then you no longer need to use AI if you don't want to. But anyway, very exciting. And there's, again, a lot of AI energy at Celigo, and we're going to be putting this chat window everywhere to help you do stuff in the product. Okay, so now the next thing I wanted to touch on was just previewing the stuff you're building, and I think that's especially important when you're using AI stuff. So maybe it's worth noting, like one of our kind of foundational things that, so as a company, we spend a lot of time thinking about AI and what it means, and what's our stance on AI, where does it belong in our product, and one of the foundational things that we've kind of all agreed on is that AI should never do anything automatically. There should always be a human there to verify, test, and accept the results that an AI gives you. So the AIs are there to help humans do things faster, but they're not smart enough, not trustworthy enough yet to let them do anything automatically. So everywhere in our UI, you're going to want to preview the results of what an AI gives you. And then also you should be doing this for the stuff you yourself are drafting. And again, this is a core part of our product. It's been this way for a long time, but I just want to highlight it here when doing transformations, when doing handlebars. It lets you want to be clicking this preview if not having auto preview on, so that you can see the exact output based on the input record that you're dealing with when you're building this stuff. So, you're always going to have like a test input record that's from your mock output in your source record, source bubble. In your flow, you define a mock output, and then here's your test record, and then it lets you build expressions and then be able to click preview to see exactly what it's going to look like. So this is exactly what's going to go in the field value for this field. And if I click save and close, and click preview here, again, I can now see my new object, my new field, my expression with the exact value. So on that last page, we were able to see just the expression because we were just building that expression. Now bouncing out of this page, we're now able to preview kind of the larger transformation. And you can modify the input data. You could have different versions of the input record that you store in a file somewhere, and you can paste them to test one at a time. But definitely good to, as you're making changes, to either have auto preview on or to just be clicking the preview button regularly. I don't use auto preview. I find it distracting when things are moving on the screen when I'm not ready. So I just click the preview button often. But then after you add something in, click preview to see that it does exactly what you want it to do. And this is just building your flow up, ground up, always from the standpoint of this is working, now let's do the next thing, it's working. And I can see it working with these previews where I control the input, I can type anything I want in here. It's already replicated there, and then here's up above where I'm setting the rules, and again, all of that you can click preview as much as you want to get it working exactly like you want. Okay, so now the next thing that we want to do is so we're going to now, we've kind of covered everything, where we've covered a lot, and so the next thing that I want to do is build a complex object to kind of show one more really advanced use case. And all right, so the advanced use case that I want to show is building an object array, and then we're going to source elements for the object array from 3 different places in our input. All right, so and I like this use case because it just highlights the power of the Transformation 2.0 engine, in that you can really build anything, any type of data structure, sourcing stuff from anywhere in your input record. And again, the same engine is running for Mapper 2.0 as well, so you can do the same types of functionality there. Okay, so I'm going to add a new output field, my object array, and then what I'm going to do here is click over into the settings. Oops, sorry, I should have, I could have done this in either place, but I'm going to say object array. Okay, and then I'm going to click over into settings. And the input field, I'm going to source first of all from just the top level root object, my source record. So let me save and close that, and then let's do new field, and we're going to choose let's just choose the token field, and let's click preview and see if that's working. So great, so I have a new object array, and then I have one object in there sourcing from the root record, the root source record, where my new field contains a token. Now let's say I want to get more objects. So the way that I do that is in the input field for the object array. If you click in here, you can see that you can separate fields with a comma. So I can do a comma, and now I can choose another place to go source from. So now I'm going to go all the way into that elements array within arrays within arrays. Let me click save and close. And what we're going to do now for this one, so you'll notice too, as you're saying these things, the tabs show up automatically. So now I can go over here, and a new field here, I'm going to select the type field. Oops, let me go down to the right one, type field here. Okay, and then let me preview to make sure it's working the way I want. So now I have, my object array with the field I did before, and then now I see a bunch of other objects that represent all these different objects down here, where I'm getting the type field out for each one. And this is really unrealistic, the exact thing that I'm doing here, but again, just showcasing what you can do. And I think, okay, and before I source from another place, I want to highlight something also that's interesting. So you'll notice that, like, when I went in and selected this this field here, notice that we no longer have the array brackets and the wildcards, like we did up above here, and like we see in the tab itself, where we're telling it which array we're kind of iterating through and sourcing from. But now when we're choosing specific fields, those things are gone. And this is a very important nuance of how our engine works. So when you are in the context of building an array and you say, I want to source elements from a specific JSON path in your source input, where that source is an iterator going through lots of different objects based on the JSON path, when you are then choosing a field within that iteration context, we are taking out the array data structure. We are kind of dynamically building you this simplified object where you have $, event, blocks, but instead of blocks being arrayed, now it's just the block that you're currently on in the iteration. Same with elements here. So if I was like on, block number 1, element number 4, element number 2, I would have kind of a helper object of just that exact set of objects tied together. And just, again, that's really awesome, because then I don't have to think about arrays at all when I'm in this context of just trying to find a field within this thing I'm iterating. So I just kind of specify the path, taking out array syntax. I don't have to think about arrays anymore. I just do the path that I want to reference, and then it's handling all the iteration of the arrays and the indexes behind the scenes for me. And that's just a huge helper if you've ever had to deal with, wildcard, array brackets, syntax. Do I use like dot versus brackets versus whatever? This just makes it really easy in that you don't have to do that at all. Again, when you're in this context. And then if for some reason you did want to, you can still iterate through other arrays in this context, but it's just the ones that are being iterated here, you don't have to. But if there were other arrays within these objects, you could still iterate to find specific elements. So it's just going to simplify kind of the parent-child relationship up the chain back up to the source based on the iterator. I hope that makes sense. Maybe the takeaway there is just, you're just picking fields from our dropdown. The syntax for arrays is gone because we've simplified the object to help you when you're in this context of picking things within iterators. Okay, and then, all right, so the last source, let's just do one more source. So let me go back up into settings, and then let's say that I wanted to get something from the authorizations array. So I choose that, save and close, go over here. Let's just pick team ID, great, preview, and we can see, one last value. And again, so just to recap, we built a new array of objects sourcing from 3 different places. And doing that is really easy. You just comma separate, the different places you want to source from. You can do it from here directly, or you can do it from within this page. This little drop down will guide you as well. And then you're going to get a tab for each one where you can, and then you can also copy objects as is. Maybe you don't want to do defining the fields themselves. You could just copy the objects as is. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is let's just do something very similar. So let's do, instead of an object array, my string array. Okay, let's do a string array here. And, really, I just wanted to highlight that even easier to do this type stuff. Just click preview. So we can see here, if you're just doing a string array, you just specify where you want to get the strings from. You could do the same pattern where you source from lots of different places. I just chose the most complicated one here to get all the strings, but I could keep doing comma, another source, comma, another source. I could hard code values. You could comma and do the root level object, but then do a hard coded mapping to add your own values in, and so on. So again, pretty limitless in what you can solve with this new engine for transformations and mappers. Okay, so that's it, and I'm going to discard all this stuff. And so just to recap, transformations are really important because they let you simplify the data before you process the data in all your flow steps. If you have lots of flow steps, that just will save you a lot of headache. And then if you have a lot of sources but only one flow step, it also lets you do the canonical use cases where then every time you add a new source, you just transform it into your canonical format, and then it'll just get processed automatically by your destination flow steps because they know the format, they know how to work with it, and you don't really have to mess with that part of your flow to add in new sources. So again, very foundational part of building flows, and hopefully you find this video helpful, and good luck everyone out there automating stuff. All right, cheers, bye.